Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Selina and in today's video we're going to be sewing a tiered summer dress. To make this dress you're going to need 3 to 4 meters of 100% cotton fabric. I had 3 meters and I would definitely recommend getting a bit more to leave room for error. You're also going to need normal thread, elastic thread and fabric scissors. Throughout this video you'll see me using a red cotton fabric instead of the blue one that I used for my thumbnail. That's because I only decided to make this tutorial after I finished the original dress, but all the methods and techniques are the same. So without further ado, let's get sewing. We're going to start this project by cutting out the skirt. On this occasion I have decided to use a half circle skirt and I've put the formula you will need to find your waist radius on the screen, but I'll also link a helpful video about creating circle skirts down below. After you've calculated this, measure and mark from one corner of your fabric. Don't forget to include seam allowance in your calculation. Once you have done this, connect the dots with a fashion ruler or freehand. From where we've marked the waist circumference, we're going to measure down the length that you want the underskirt to be. As with the first measurements, we're going to mark the fabric and then draw the line. After we've cut out that piece, you're going to cut out the same one, but this time with a slightly increased seam allowance for your waist ratio. Repeat that step for the top skirt, but using a smaller length. After you have finished cutting out the skirt pieces, you should have 4 in total that resembles something similar to what I have on the screen. I've put my measurements for reference, so please feel free to pause the video at any time. Now, vertically line up the edges of the 2 underskirt pieces and pin them together. Repeat this process for the top skirt pieces, and then once you're finished, take them to your sewing machine. Sew the side seams together using a normal straight stitch, making sure to backstitch at both the beginning and the end. For reference, I have set both my tension and length to 3 and my seam allowance is 1 centimeter. When you have finished sewing all of the side seams together, we're going to finish the raw edges with a zigzag stitch. You can of course use a serger if you have one. To do this, we're going to cut off about half a centimeter from the raw edge and then do a zigzag stitch on top. After you've finished off all of the raw edges, I would highly recommend trying on your skirt. At this point you can determine your desired length and make sure you hem it correctly. You can skip this next step and go directly to hemming it at your desired seam allowance if you want. However, I measure mine at my required length from my waistline and make a mark at the bottom of the skirt. Next I will hem the skirt roughly 2 centimeters and pin this in place. Once you are happy with the length and have pinned your hem in place, you can go ahead and sew this. Remember to do this on both the underskirt and the top skirt. To finish off your skirt pieces, iron the seams towards the back of the skirt, then fold it right sides out and iron the seam flat. To draft the top half of the front bodice, I have taken a garment that I like the scoop neck on and copied the neckline and underarm curve. Additionally, I will measure from the lowest part of the scoop down to just under my bust, as this is where I would want the bodice to sit. As you can see, this has helped me with the starting point to drafting the top of my bodice. Where the strap begins on the top is where I will start drawing upwards for my strap. Then, I will mark 6 centimeters inwards and connect this to the scoop neckline. You can set the skirt pieces aside for now, as we are moving on to the bodice portion of our summer dress project. I will trace around this pattern on my fabric and then proceed to cut it out. Once you have cut out the bodice pattern, hold it up against your body and determine where the darts will go. For me personally, I had loose space in the curve going under my arm and in the front part of my waist. What I did to eliminate both of these loose areas was create a curved dart. Basically, you pin the loose area by your underarm and in the front part of your waist, and then you sew from point A to point B, creating a curved dart. Before you sew the darts in place, make sure you drape it over your body again to ensure there is no more loose area and the bodice fits you correctly. Once you are happy with it, you can begin to sew the darts in place. Again, you can skip the step if you want, but I chose to mark 1 cm away from where I had pinned the darts as I made the bodice with this additional seam allowance in mind. Like we've done with every raw edge, you can trim roughly half a centimetre from the straight stitch and then go over it with a zigzag stitch. Then, like we did with the skirt, we will press the seam away from the centre towards the back, flip the fabric and press the seam flat. Now that we know the bodice will fit with no loose areas, we will draft the lining fabric from the front bodice that we have just sewn. Simply trace around it to create a new bodice pattern, then place it on your fabric and cut it out. After the lining pattern has been cut out, place it on top of the front bodice pattern, nice sides facing each other, then pin in place. Then take it to your sewing machine and straight stitch along the top half of the bodice, making sure to backstitch at each end. After you've finished sewing the top half of your bodice, it's time to turn it right sides out. This part is quite tedious, especially with the straps, but just take your time. You won't be able to get the corners of the straps out by hand, so you can use a small tool such as the sewing machine screwdriver to poke out the edges of the straps. Once you've turned the bodice right sides out, as with the skirt, iron the straps and bodice flat. To complete the front bodice, we're going to cut out the waistband for the front. I've put my measurements on the screen for reference. This next part is optional, but I created some straight darts on my waistband that would line up and continue from the curved darts that we sewed on the top of our bodice. If you choose to do the straight darts, do this only on the longer piece of your waistband and use the shorter piece as the lining, which will hide the dart seam. Now place the waistband nice sides facing with the top of the bodice and align the seams together, making sure the curved darts and the straight darts line up. Then use a straight stitch to sew them together. I would suggest before you sew the waistband and the bodice together that you flip the waistband over and make sure that the darts align. Once you've sewed the bodice and the waistband together, it should look a little something like this. As always, make sure you finish the raw edges by cutting and using a zigzag stitch or serger. Finally, we're moving on to the back portion of the dress, and we'll start by cutting out the straps. I've put the measurements on the screen for reference. Then place 2 pieces right sides together and sew around the entire strap, leaving one of the 6 cm sides open. Once we've sewn the sides together, turn it inside out. Again, you can use the sewing machine screwdriver to poke out the tricky corners of the strap. As we've done previously, iron the straps completely flat. I forgot to show this, however, you will need 2 rectangle pieces for the back panel. In order to find your measurement for the back part of your bodice, you will need to measure the side of your front bodice, then decide based on your size how wide you would like the panel to be. Please bear in mind that the back panel will be sheared, so you may want to take this into consideration when deciding the width of your panel pieces. Once you have the back pieces, measure and decide where you would like the straps to be located. You will place the open end of the strap at the top and align it between the two back pieces. Secure the straps in place using a regular straight stitch, making sure that they do not move around too much. Then press the seams flat with an iron. For this next part, you will need a roll of elastic thread which will have to be thread by hand into the bobbin. Make sure you do not pull excessively on the thread as you loop it around the bobbin. I am starting my shearing 1 cm away from the top of the back bodice, and I will sew my shearing in 1 cm intervals. Don't forget to always start and finish your shearing with a back stitch. Now, I definitely wasn't going to show you the whole recording of the hour or two that I spent shearing, but once you have finished with that, ensure that you leave at least 2 cm free at the bottom of the bodice. We will now attach the front and back bodice at the sides. This can be quite frustrating as the shearing is going to want to curl on the sides, so just take your time and be patient with it. Connect the two sides using a straight stitch. However, when finishing the raw edges, do not cut off half a centimetre. Instead, leave it the length that it is and simply go over the edges with the zigzag stitch. Once again, now would be a good time to try on both of your garments before attaching them to one another to ensure the fit is right. Now for the final step, we will attach the skirt to the bodice. If your measurements allow, try to match up the side seams with one another. You will turn the skirt inside out and align the waist with the bottom of the bodice, then pin in place. Once you get to the back side of the skirt and the shearing panel, find roughly the middle of the back skirt and the middle of the shearing panel and attach the two together there. Whilst you sew, you will have to gather some of the bottom of the back bodice so that it will match the measurements from your skirt. After you have finished sewing the bodice and skirt pieces together, you'll be finished and your project will be complete.